Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video from Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach. In today's video, I'm going to be going through my current preseason team reveal just to let you know where my head is at in regards to a lot of the more popular players and just overall how I'm looking to build my team and squad structure. So hopefully you do enjoy the video. If you do please give it a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing as well to the channel if you haven't already, and let's get straight into it. So I'm going to take you through this position by position, and if anyone is listening to me on the audio, which I am on audio platforms, do recommend actually jumping onto YouTube because I'm going to put some player stats and graphs and things up as well when I talk through some of the players that I've chosen. So the hooker position, as some of you who have already kind of started building your own round one teams would have probably found, it's quite a hard position to find like a lot of good quality options. There only really seems to be maybe a handful of options that we can really consider. So you're probably going to see this combination in a lot of teams, Harry Grant and Jaden Brayley. Now I am very interested in Jeremy Marshall-King. He's a lot cheaper than Harry Grant. I believe he's around $639,000. He's priced at an average of about 62, but Jeremy Marshall-King, when pulling the numbers, he was battling through some injuries. If you actually look at him when he was playing above kind of 70 minutes, he was averaging 79 and Harry Grant averaged 73.5. So not too dissimilar there. So I do feel like Jeremy Marshall-King is someone who I am interested in. Both JMK and Harry Grant do have buys in the first 4 weeks. Marshall-King's is in round 3. Harry Grant does have one in round 4. Harry Grant, I guess I just had the money available with my team, so I figured he is the standout hooker option. I mentioned it in my best guns video. He has been the best hooker over the last 3 years for SuperCoach. 73.5 average last year. I always kind of generally feel that with Harry Grant, he does better at the opening start of the season. Surprisingly, last year though, that wasn't actually the case. Pre-Origin, he was averaging 69.3, but close to 70. So very similar to Jeremy Marshall-King, but I think just it's kind of a bit of a safety net, bit of a comfort blanket, knowing that you've got Harry Grant there from round 1 and you just know you're not really going to have to trade him out unless he gets injured or maybe through the origin period. Otherwise, you can kind of set and forget him and minimize your trades at the hooker spot. In terms of the backup, I've got Jaden Brayley. Again, he's going to be a very popular option. You're going to see in a lot of teams in round 1. There's a good reason for that. He's 330k, so he's extremely cheap. When he is fully fit, he is generally an 80-minute hooker for the Newcastle Knights. Now, I don't think he's going to be an 80-minute hooker when he starts the season. He's probably going to be eased back in, given that he had quite a significant injury over the last 2 years. Below me, you can see some of his stats in the previous seasons. So seasons 2020, 21, and 2022, he was consistently averaging about 77 plus minutes, so call it 80 minutes a game, and he was pretty much bang on hitting 58 or 59 average. So that's kind of what we can expect from Jaden Brayley when he's fully fit. If we think he's more likely going to be playing around 55 to 60 to start off with, because Phoenix Crossland was a very good fill-in for the Knights last season at the hooker spot. Let's say Jaden Brayley plays 55 or 60 minutes, I can see him kind of averaging around mid-40s. And I think this is fine because for the 330k price tag, he is priced at an average of 32.6. So you're still probably going to get at least 10 to 12 points of value out of Jaden Brayley. And come round 4 when Harry Grant is on the bye, Brayley's probably just going to have to step in. And if he can give me 40 to 45 points just for that 1 week, but not have to worry about having to sell Harry Grant or something because I don't have adequate cover, I think it's fine. And people who are running with Jeremy Marshall-King, you're going to have a similar situation where Brayley's going to have to step in for you in round 3. So I think it's probably not the worst hooking combination. And, I think Jaden Brayley's pretty much going to be staying there for me in my round 1 team. Harry Grant, I'd probably say is 85% locked. The only other option I'm probably really considering though is Marshall-King. Now, the next spot is the front row forward, which is definitely a spot I've been kind of toing and froing with because I've seen quite a few teams and they're all starting with a lot of them are starting with one gun front row forward, main one being Payne Haas, which I can't fault starting with Payne Haas because that's probably generally the best time to own him is at the start of the season when he's coming fresh off a preseason. He's not kind of, because we know the workload that he gets through and he puts his body through an incredible amount of work. I don't know how he does it. He's a bit of a freak of nature, I guess. But during the origin period, kind of post-origin, he may have some bumps and bruises. You're probably not going to have that at the start of the season. I know there's some report about him having a bit of a hamstring niggle, I believe it is, but it doesn't seem to be anything overly serious. So he's probably going to be fine by round 1. And so he's 750k. He's probably the front row forward I would consider if I was going to spend up in that position. And I'm still definitely open to that because, you can kind of very safely lock in between 70 to 75 from him every week for the first kind of 12 to 13 rounds of the season. And you can kind of, again, he's similar to Harry Grant. He's a bit of a safety net. Probably the difference is that he just doesn't have quite that ceiling of, the 90, 100 plus that someone like a Harry Grant can deliver, who can go 110, 120 plus. With the front row forward position, maybe I can try to get by with some kind of cheaper mid-range options. And that's currently how I've set up my own team structure. I've gone Ruben Cotter, Tom Flegler, Keenan Palasia, and Sam Hughes in the front row forward spot. So Sam Hughes, I'll quickly cover him off. He's kind of been touted by Phil Gould as similar to what we had with Jacob Preston last year. You know, the whole training the house down. He's really having a great preseason. If he can jag a bench spot for the Bulldogs at 238k, he's near bottom dollar. I kind of feel like he's someone I can just sit there. Probably will be a bit of a slow burn, but hopefully can make some cash. Ruben Cotter, I've tried to pick a few guys who I think maybe will have an improvement in minutes or improvement in just overall performance that hopefully then gets an uptick in their average. So that's kind of what I've listed here in the table to the right of me. So Ruben Cotter averaged 53.1 in 2023. But when he was consistently playing 50 plus minutes, his average actually increased to 59.9, so more or less call it 60. So there's potentially 7 points of value there if he does actually manage to get consistently playing 50 minutes. That can be a bit of an issue sometimes playing with Todd Payton. He sometimes does rotate his forward minutes a little bit. James Tarmel has left the club, but I don't really think that's going to have a major impact on Ruben Cotter. I'm more hoping for the Cowboys generally having an uptick in overall performance, and I think Ruben Cotter is quite critical to that. So I'm just kind of hoping at this point, if he can just get an uptick in minutes, get closer to that 50 plus mark, then hopefully he gets towards that 60 average. And I feel like beginning of the season, when he doesn't have to worry about origin and things like that, that's maybe a good time to capitalize on someone like Cotter. So I've kind of got him as my kind of first mid-range front row forward. Tom Flegler, he's going to be very popular. You're going to see him in quite a lot of round one teams as well, coming in with a 46.6 average in 2023. Now, in the games for the Broncos where he played more than 50 minutes, he averaged 52.8. So again, we're looking at about 6 to 7 points of potential value there with Flegler. And I think a lot of the rationale for Flegler is that he's kind of been signed by the Dolphins as maybe kind of their marquee front row forward. They've got some good depth there. They've got like Tom Gilbert, there'll be Flegler, they've got Jesse Bromwich and a few other guys there. But I think Flegler's kind of that up and coming front row forward, you know, they're generally a younger age as well. So hopefully there's a potential uptick in his minutes. And I think Dolphins seem to have recruited very well in the off-season. So they also feel like a team I'm kind of looking at as potentially can have a really good start to the season. So Flegler, that's kind of one of the reasons why I've got him in there. My bench front row forward, so with Flegler, he will be out for a bye in round 3. So I'm kind of thinking I'm going to have someone from my bench front row forward who can actually come in and do a decent job for that 1 week. I've got Keenan Palasia to do that, $365,000. He's also moved from the Broncos to the Titans. So kind of 3 main forwards there, I guess, for the Titans will be Tino Fa'asuamaleaui, you've got Mo Fotuaika, and then probably Palasia is probably going to be next in there. And he would probably be mixed in with the likes of Jamin Jolliffe. Now with Palasia, I pulled his numbers from when he played more than 30 minutes for the Broncos, and his average also stepped up to 42.2. Towards the back end of the season, he actually had quite a few games where he was playing consistently over like 50 minutes. Kind of in the run home for the Broncos last season, he played games of 60, 52, 54, 53 and 64 minutes. In those games, he scored 51, 53, and 42. So kind of a few decent scores there, kind of around that 50 range. I don't think he's probably going to be playing that many minutes for the Titans. That would be my guess. But if he can be someone who's going to be hovering around getting 7 points of value on his price tag, make some money, and then for 1 week he can step in and hopefully pump out like a 40 to 45, I might be able to live with that. And obviously money is tight at the beginning of the season. So that's kind of the reason why I've started with Palasia at the 3rd front row forward spot. Of the other mid-rangers who I were looking at as well, I had Hamsele moving to the Dragons. He's at a pretty good price at 425k, I think. He had a 2023 average of 41.7, which he had one game where he only played, I think, 1 or 2 minutes. If you take that game out, his average stepped up to like 44. And then in games where he played more than 40 minutes, it was an average of 47.3. So again, we're talking about 6 to 7 points of potential value there. And he could be potentially a nice little cheeky mid-range option for your front row forward. Another one being is Terrell May from the Sydney Roosters. May is tough because I'm a Roosters fan. He had a really good end to last season as well when helping the Roosters eventually make the top 8. I just look at the Roosters forward pack and there's a lot of bodies there. You've still got Waerea-Hargreaves, you've still got Lindsay Collins, you've got Terrell May. You're going to have Spencer Leniu coming into the team as well, and then you've got other guys who can play some middle as well. You've got Angus Crichton who can play some middle. You've got Nat Butcher. I suspect they'll mainly play on the edge, but there's a lot of forwards in there who will like to put their hand up and do a lot of work. So that's probably the only potential downside with Terrell May, is that I just don't know how much more upside you're going to get on him compared to what you were already getting from last year. But for reference, in games that he played over 30 minutes last season, he averaged 49.6, up from his 42.1. So again, that actually looks quite tempting. Someone who thinks, if you think there's going to be a small improvement in his role, and if he kind of just averages 30 minutes off the bench, if he's going to give you about 50 points from that, you'd definitely take that. from a front row forward who I think is priced at 430k. So again, there's a few mid-range options who I was considering. I've ended up with Flegler, Cotter, and Keenan Palacio on the bench, and that's currently my front row forward makeup. Now, the second row forward, probably going to be one of the most discussed positions in the preseason for 2024. You're going to see mid-ranges all over the place. There's going to be so many kind of top mid-range lists that you probably see on, Facebook and Twitter and on YouTube and other podcasts and things. So I'm not going to get into all of that right now. I'm just going to go through some of my ones who, more for budget reasons, some of the ones that I've picked. So at the moment, I've got 4 kind of mid-range 2RFs and I've got no gun 2RFs. That's just kind of how I've been able to use the money, I guess, elsewhere in the team. So at the moment, I've got Sean Lane, Beau Fermor, Brendan Piakura, and Josh Curran as my 4 mid-range 2RFs. Sean Lane, I think, is almost going to be a lock for me. He's probably going to be one of the most highly owned players, I think, this preseason as well. Had a very injury-disrupted last season, averaging only 44 points. Also, Dylan Brown was unavailable for a lot of last season as well, due to his own kind of suspension and disciplinary issues. But we saw in 2022, when Dillbags and Sean Lane were kind of forming a really great partnership. Sean Lane was consistently getting attacking stats here, was getting a pretty good base workload as well. So he averaged 69 in 2022. 2021, he averaged 53. Again, it's just a value thing. He's priced at about a 44, 45 average, and we probably think that with an 80-minute role locked in on the left-hand edge alongside Dylan Brown, the chance of him getting kind of 44 is probably going to be quite easy. What we probably think is more likely going to be mid-50s to 60s, if not maybe pushing that kind of mid-60s up like we saw in 2022. So you're seeing already a lot of value out of Sean Lane. The Eels do have a pretty good run as well, so the potential for attacking stats is going to be there at the beginning of the season. So Sean Lane, for me, I think barring any injury in the preseason, he'll probably be there in round 1. Another one that I quite like is Brendan Piakura from the Broncos. So Kurt Capel has moved to the Warriors. So we suspect that Piakura is going to be taking Capel's role on one of the edge spots. And in games last season where he was playing more than 60 minutes, he averaged 60. His total season average was 42. So again, you can see some kind of good value there where if we think he's going to be someone who's going to consistently be playing 60 plus minutes, you're already seeing a lot of value on that 42 point average. He does probably need attacking stats a little bit more than maybe some other second row forwards. He's not quite got the base work rate. Broncos do have a fairly tough start to the season, but I look at it as like Broncos were in the grand final. They're a high quality team, plenty of young talent in that team continually improving. I think the potential for getting attacking stats will be there. So I feel like I'm okay with taking a potential shot at Piakura to begin the season, despite a tough draw. He is a second row forward at the end of the day, so they do rely a little bit more, they rely more on the workload compared to the attacking stats, and he's in a good team at the end of the day too. And I think his role looks fairly secure if he can get one of the starting edge roles for the Broncos. My third one that I've got is Beau Fermor. So he's coming off a pretty significant ACL injury, but he's had a long time away to recover because that ACL actually happened towards the beginning of last season. So he's had I think he would have had close to about 12 months in recovery by the time round 1 starts. What I've got below me is some stats from the last 3 seasons, and I've kind of equalized it out to if he was playing 80 minutes on average. So kind of he hovers around the low 60s to mid 60s average. So he averaged 65 in 2022. In 2021, he averaged 46, but again, equalizing that to an 80-minute kind of average, it would have been above, closer to about the 60 range. And what you can see, it's not really work rate for him. He probably does rely on the attacking stats and scoring tries a bit more. I think a big watch for me for Fermor will be what side of the field does he play to start the season, because obviously they've got a new coach in Des Hasler. He may change things around. He was really good in 2022 when he was playing on the left edge, and so a lot more of the ball was going down that side. And if he's playing on the left edge outside Kieran Foran, we saw how good Dave Fifita was last season, how much having Foran there benefited him. If Fermor's playing on the left edge, I think he's pretty much going to be close to having being in my starting round 1 team. If he's playing on the right, that probably does bring it into question a little bit more. At 467k, you've got the likes of Vilau Makikau around that price. You've got Sia Wong from the Roosters as well. So you've kind of got a couple of others then competing. But if he's on the left, then I feel very comfortable, I think, starting with him in round 1. Josh Curran is another one from the Bulldogs at 422k, just moving over from the Warriors. We suspect that he's going to be starting in the lock spot for the Bulldogs. What I like with Curran is that he has got a very SuperCoach friendly game. Like you can see in 2021, he had an average of 67. It reduced in 2022 to 54, and then it was only 41 last season. And a lot of that was, I think, just not a lack of good game time for the Warriors. They had a very stable forward pack, and Curran just was having some difficulty breaking into that. But whenever he was on the field, he does possess those kind of qualities that we like for SuperCoach. He does have an attacking stat in him. He likes to offload, so those chances of getting some of those sneaky try assists and things is there. Plus, he's generally got a pretty good workload as well. So I'm hoping that if he gets a reinvigorated role, hopefully more minutes for the Bulldogs, I like him at 420k to start my round 1 team. The other 2 second row forwards, so we've got Tallis Duncan from the Rabbitohs. He's been highly touted as well. There's been some talk that Jai Arrow is more likely going to be playing a middle role for the Rabbitohs this year. Harmsele's moved off to the Dragons, and Tallis Duncan potentially could take one of those starting back row spots. If so, that'd be almost, I think he'd be a lock in a lot of teams in round 1 at only 320k. He could also just potentially be getting a bench spot, but he had a few games last season. He did impress, and I think there just seems to be good talk about him out of the Rabbitohs camp in the preseason. So he seems likely to get a decent role in the 17. So 320k feels like a fairly low risk to start with him. The last spot is more of a kind of a punt on a potential cheapie in Matamua from the West Tigers. Sean Bloor has moved to the Melbourne Storm, so hoping Matamua gets some kind of chance at maybe the lock spot, although that could be Fanua Pole, or he gets a spot on the bench. But that spot is very much kind of a TBD, kind of pending round 1, pending trials, just to kind of get a better idea on some other second row forward cheapies. At the moment, I've just got him there kind of as a placeholder, but that will likely, hopefully be, fingers crossed, a good second row forward cheapie. Okay, so moving into the halfback spot, starting halfback, Nicho Hynes. I'm very confident that he'll be there round 1, barring any kind of preseason injury. I went through my best draw video, the Sharks draw to begin the season. They've got a fairly tough matchup in round 1 away to the Warriors, but then I believe they've got the Bulldogs and then the West Tigers. Those are 2 games that I'm pretty much almost going to have either vice captaincy or captaincy on Nicho Hynes. And so I'm very comfortable in starting with Hynes. I really don't think I need to explain him too much. Ultimate accumulator of Supercoach points. He's probably been the best performing gun in Supercoach over the last 3 seasons, so he's close to a lock in my round 1 team. Now, the backup halfback was more of the interesting one where I was having a bit of a thinking in my head as to who I would be going with. I think I'm probably going to struggle to start with Nathan Cleary, I think, to begin the season. One, he's like 912k, so it's a lot of money, especially when you're trying to fit in other positions in your team. He is, probably the second best Supercoach option that we have, but it's not the best opening start for the Panthers. So just having a look here, to start the season, Penrith have got Melbourne, Parramatta, Broncos, Roosters, Manly, and then a bye. Now, Cleary can score in any game. He's not really he's matchup proof effectively. Like, he can score points against anyone. But I look at it as until the first 5 weeks of the season, there's probably not many games where I think I'm going to be like VCing him or captaining him. I'm probably going to be looking at guys like Nicho Hynes, maybe someone like a Kalen Ponga, if I get him into my fullback spot, who's got games against like the Dragons in round 5, Cowboys in round 2, for example. So I kind of looking at it as like, if I'm not really going to be putting any kind of captaincy or vice captaincy on Cleary, he did also have an injury post the grand final. I don't know. I've just got this feeling that Penrith might just want to slowly build into the season. That might be a really dumb assumption because, Panthers are Panthers and that they've been the best team that we've almost have ever seen in the NRL. But I'm just, for whatever reason, I'm just not quite feeling Cleary is the must own at the start of the season. After his bye, though, the draw really does open up for the Panthers. So he's got then the Tigers, Cowboys, Rabbitohs, Bulldogs, Warriors, Sharks, Dragons. So like the run then starts looking a little bit better. At that point, I might be like, okay, I need to do I need to do what I can to get someone like Nathan Cleary. So that's kind of why I've looked at someone like a Mitchell Moses, because I know a few other teams that I've seen have gone a bit cheaper with the West Tigers boys of Jaden Sullivan or Aiden Caesar, which I can understand because, you want them to be kind of lower price guys who can make some money for you to then you can eventually upgrade to Cleary. Well, the first thing is that the Tigers have the bye in round 1, so that's already 1 week behind that they're going to be in terms of cash development. If you start with someone like Jaden Sullivan and Aiden Caesar. And apologies, West Tigers fans. I just don't have a lot of trust in that team to come out of the blocks really strong for them to actually be making a lot of coin to then be able to get you up to a Nathan Cleary. So at the moment, in terms of a team structure, I'm kind of trying to find a halfback within that kind of in the mid-tier or maybe slightly higher who I can think is a better bridge to Cleary in the future. And that's kind of how I've landed on Mitch Moses. I mentioned in my best gun video what I like about some of the options in Supercoach is if they're goal kickers. Mitch Moses is the goal kicker for the Parramatta Eels. I like their draw. Bulldogs, Penrith, Manly, West Tigers, Raiders, and then the Cowboys for the first 6 is not a bad run. If you extend that to round 7, just having a quick look at my spreadsheet here, they've got the Dolphins and then they've got Manly in round 8 before the bye in round 9. So again, I kind of look at that as, by the time I might want Cleary, maybe that's going to be around round 7. I've kind of got at least a few good games out of Mitch Moses before I then maybe use him as a bridge to Cleary. And I've just got some stats here. Moses' season average was 68.1, but in kind of quote-unquote games against easy oppositions, that stepped up to 75.1. So I'm kind of looking at it as, can I maybe get some extra value out of Mitch Moses if he gets from 695k to maybe 750, closer to 800, and if Cleary's maybe gone down from 912 to 850 or something like that, I can maybe see a situation in my head where I'm only having to spend maybe 100k to get from Moses to Cleary. And I like the fact that he's goal kicking. I like the round 1 matchup. That's very tempting as well. Moses probably does have a bit of a thing for being a flat track bully. But again, I'm getting a feeling about Parramatta. I think they're going to want to have a good start to the season. Last season was pretty disappointing for them with the whole Dylan Brown situation and not being able to make the top 8. So that's kind of how I've landed on Mitch Moses. If he doesn't get involved in all the attacking plays for the Eels, if they're scoring points, then hopefully he's kicking some goals and at least benefiting a little bit from that. The Panthers matchup in round 2 isn't fantastic, but Parramatta have done well against Penrith recently in the last few years. So I'm hoping, kind of fingers crossed, that if Mitch Moses has a good start in round 1, and hopefully he can make some money over the first 6 weeks, he might be a nice bridge to Cleary. Now, 5'8", I kind of look at the 5'8" similar to the hooker position. There just doesn't seem to be quite a lot of good quality options. So you're probably going to see this combination, I think, in a lot of teams as well. Dylan Brown and KO Weeks. So KO Weeks, just to quickly cover him off, there's probably potential that he's going to be the front runner for the halfback, not the halfback, the 5'8" spot for the Canberra Raiders, given that Jack Whiten has moved to the Rabbitohs. So at 273k, he's got dual fullback and 5'8", which is quite handy. And he had a few glimpses of some good performances for Manly last season as well. So I think at sub 300k, playing 5'8", for a decent Raiders team, he kind of feels like a fairly obvious choice, I want to say, at 5'8", and is a good price as well. Dylan Brown, again, I pulled some quick stats together, but you probably all know if you've watched this channel for a few years, I love Dylan Brown as a SuperCoach option. Just pulling his stats from the last few seasons, the one thing that sticks out with him, his base stats are just ridiculous for a 5'8". He's pretty much averaging 35 to 37 in base over the last 3 seasons, which for a 5'8" is ridiculous. He ended up with an average of 76.5. And given that he's got that really good base, he's more or less matchup proof. I know I spoke about the good draw previously, just talking about Mitch Moses. Draw doesn't really worry me with Dylan Brown. Averaged 76.5 last season. If you look at his average against easy teams, 76.1. If you look at it against hard teams, 75.5. So we know that he can just score points against anyone. So again, he's very expensive, 781k. Other consideration was probably someone like a Cam Munster. Cam Munster averaged about 71, which we kind of get from him most seasons, is around that low 70s. But Dillbags, I think he just feels like the nice, safe option. He's the most expensive one. You can trade him down to anyone if you need to, but I feel like he's going to be someone who's very popular in round 1 and probably going to be the number 1 choice in 5'8", and he's going to be mine, I think, most likely for round 1 as well. I can't see myself changing him, I think, come my round 1 team. So now just getting into the center wings and then eventually the fullbacks. Less stats about these two positions because these are more just kind of a function of like gut feeling and also just trying to find good cheapies. So center wing, I've gone a little bit cheaper, which I'm not in love with because I do know that there is always a risk running a lot of cheapies and mid-ranges in your center wing, and sometimes it is good to be able to start with at least one gun center wing. Just couldn't quite make the money work in this structure, so hopefully something I can maybe revisit. But my starting centre wings, I've got Taylor May, Jesse Arthurs, Xavier Savage, and Bostock from the Dolphins. And then on the bench, I've just got a bunch of cheapies, hopefully cheapies. Ethan Strange, Iro from the Sharks, and then Chevy Stewart from the Raiders. So Taylor May, I'm very, very comfortable, I think, starting with him for round 1. He's priced at an average of 45, and in 2022, when he had a full season for the Panthers, on the wing, he averaged 64. Now, he's most likely going to be playing in the centres for the Panthers. I expect the back 5 to be Dylan Edwards, Sunia Taruva, and Brian To'o on the wings. And then you'll have Isaac Tongo and you'll have Taylor May in the centres. Even at centre, though, like it's probably not as good as playing on the wing, because on the wing you get more of those kind of more tries, more line breaks when you cross over, when you get put through on the corner. But I feel like he's a good player who still will maintain a fairly good work rate. He had a very good work rate when he was playing on the wing. And I think just playing in a very high upside attacking team in the Panthers, I think the points will come. 45 seems to be a very safe amount of points that he'll be able to easily match. And then he's probably going to provide at least 10 points of value, in my opinion, if not 15. Potentially could be even 20. Taylor May's base power average from 2022 was 40 points. So if you think that's going to be, even if that drops to maybe say 35, you probably think there's going to be enough other stuff that happens during the game, like some line breaks, scoring some tries. I think that 45 is easily going to be achieved, and he's probably more likely going to surpass that. So at 459k, getting a centre for the Penrith Panthers, best team we've seen in plenty of years, then he feels like a very safe option for my round 1 team. Again, he's probably going to be very, very popular. Jesse Arthurs, the reason I've just gone with him is that he's likely to be getting one of the wing positions for the Broncos. The preseason talk is that Selwyn Cobbo is going to be moving to the centres, and that frees up a wing spot, likely going to be for Jesse Arthurs. Herbie Farnworth has moved to the Dolphins, hence the move for Cobbo to the centres. So with Arthurs, the draw is tough for the Broncos, but again, we're talking a very good high upside team that will score a lot of points. I like the fact that he's playing on the wing. It generally means that the base stats will go up because they take more carries out of their own end, and then better chance as well for those kind of those tries in the line breaks. And if you've got someone like Reece Walsh or Cobbo kind of putting you through a hole, Arthurs I think can benefit. 376k, again, it feels like a fairly good price. Xavier Savage at 350k. I'll talk about him, Ethan Strange, and Chevy Stewart all at the same time because they're all kind of linked together. So a lot of cheapies to come out of the Raiders, and that's mainly due to Seb Chris is suspended. He was occupying the fullback spot. I believe he's suspended until round 4 or round 5, one of the two. You've obviously got Jack Whiten moving to the Rabbitohs, and then you've got Jared Croker going into retirement. So there's a centre position that is going to be available, which we think is going to be one of Ethan Strange or Xavier Savage. So hence why I've just got both of them, and whichever one doesn't get the spot, I'll probably likely move for someone else. And then you've also got the fullback spot temporarily open, which could again be one of Xavier Savage, or it could be Chevy Stewart. So again, another reason for just having the pair of them. The issue will be, I guess, is that we just won't know if Seb Chris is going to be the preferred option as soon as he's back from the suspension to occupy that fullback spot. So that is a slight risk with one of these kind of backline Raiders cheapies. But until such time when we don't really have confirmation of that, I'm just going to start with all three of them. Come round 1, we'll probably get a bit more guidance as well on this, hopefully, and then I'll just get rid of the one who's not likely going to be in the round 1 team or going to be in the team kind of longer term. Bostock, similar reasons for having Jesse Arthurs. It sounds like he's likely to get one of the wing positions for the Dolphins. So you would have a pairing of Herbie Farnworth and Jake Averillo, and Jermaine Asako and Bostock. We just don't quite know which side of the field they're going to be playing. Bostock will likely be on the left wing, given that Asako is going to be on the right. Just don't know the centre wing pairing. I'd probably prefer him to be with Averillo. I feel like if he was with Herbie Farnworth, Farnworth is probably more likely going to be holding the ball a little bit more for himself. I suspect Farnworth will play on the left, given that's where he was playing for the Broncos. So it wouldn't be ideal for Bostock. But again, that could open up some opportunities for him for attacking stats, Farnworth being quite a good player. So that's kind of just the reason I've got him. Dolphins do have a fairly good start as well to the season, aside from their round 3 bye. So do check out my best draw video if you want to get into that a little bit more. But that's another reason why I've just got Bostock. On Iro from the Sharks, he's really there as a placeholder for a cheapie. There is some talk that Talakai could occupy the second row forward spot, freeing up a centre wing position for Iro. But again, that's still to be decided because Teague Wilson could easily just play in the second row forward spot because Wade Graham has now moved on from the Sharks and retired. So Iro, again, just a bit of a placeholder. There is some reliance on cheapies here in the centre wing, so I feel like if there's anything that I would do structurally with the team, it's likely going to be to take some money out of Grant or Moses, and that would probably be to beef up either the front row forward or to beef up the centre wing position. Finally, on the fullback spot, again, no real stats here because I think a lot of this is going to be on kind of gut feeling. One gut feeling I have is Kalyn Ponga is not going to be leaving my round 1 team, just given how extraordinary he was last season. I actually just read a comment before recording this video that someone thought I'm a Newcastle Knights fan and they had only just watched one of my videos just in the last week or so. Hopefully I'm not being too kind of optimistic about Kalyn Ponga, or maybe he's sounding too much of a fanboy because he absolutely was so good for my season last year. But Ponga, I think at 892k, he is literally underpriced if you look at his stats when he was playing at fullback and when he was goal kicking. Ponga's season average is 87, and that's what he's priced at. But if you just look at his scores, basically from round 15, when he pretty much said, I'm not going to be playing State of Origin and I'm playing at fullback and I'm going to concentrate on the Knights, here are all the scores from last season: 77, 92, 95, 47, 180, 137, 96, 122, 121, 77, 91, 128. I haven't even worked out the average, but I know it's more than 87. So you could just be buying Kalyn Ponga at value at 892k. Now, it's obviously a lot to live up to for the season that he had last year, but the reason I think I'm just going to start with him is, one, his goal kicking, which I really like. I think the Knights are obviously a good team, and I think that they haven't really had too much of a squad makeover. So again, I feel like the performances will still be good. And just looking long term as well, I think up until State of Origin, or at least for the first 8 weeks, based on my draw sorting spreadsheet, the Knights probably come out on top for draw. So the opening kind of 3 or 4 weeks aren't the best, but I think longer term, I looked at the draw and I thought, I'm going to want to get in Kalen Ponga probably by that time. So I think save the trade and get him from the beginning of the season, and that was kind of generally my mentality for picking Ponga. Final fullback spot was Tom Trbojevic. I think with this squad, I think I have 16k in the bank, so I don't have enough to stretch up to say like a Scott Drinkwater. So at the moment, I've just gone with Turbo. Again, a very reliable, kind of proven Supercoach gun at fullback. Manly don't have like an amazing start to the season, but it's not too bad. It's a bit of a mixed draw. They've got the Rabbitohs in Las Vegas. They've then got the Roosters, the Eels, the Dragons, Penrith, and then the Warriors before getting to the Titans, Parramatta. And then longer term, obviously, we're probably not going to be looking too far ahead. So it's not the easiest draw on paper. I do feel like Manly are a team that potentially could be improving this season as well. And Turbo is just a quality fullback option for Supercoach. I am tempted by Scott Drinkwater if I can get the money to work there, because I've got another good feeling about the Cowboys as well to start the season. Just don't have quite the money to stretch up to Drinkwater at this stage. Reece Walsh is obviously a strong consideration. The more I looked at the draw though for the Broncos, I thought it was a bit too tough for me to want to consider. So Roosters, Rabbitohs, Penrith, Cowboys, Melbourne in the first 5 weeks. After that, the draw does definitely open up, and I might want Reece Walsh post round 5, so get him from round 6. But I think with a tough opening start, I'm at 813k. I'm happy to not start with Reece Walsh. The obvious other ones is Ryan Papenhuyzen. He's coming in at about 645k. The only reason I just haven't started with him is that he's obviously coming off, a couple of pretty big injuries, and he comes into Penrith, Warriors, Titans, and then a bye. So I feel like the first 4 weeks, I've got enough kind of tough matchups and also the bye to have to not worry about him, kind of get a good look at him. He then has the Broncos in round 5. After that, you've got a really, you've got some better games there. We've got Bulldogs, you've got Rabbitohs, you've got Titans, a few games where maybe you think point scoring could come by a little bit easier. So the way that I've kind of structured the team at the moment is to not start with Papenhuyzen, but obviously if we see good things in the preseason, he is goal kicking for the Melbourne Storm as well. Going someone like Turbo down to Papenhuyzen, that frees up almost 200k. That could almost get me from Mitch Moses to Cleary in one go, or I go from Ruben Cotter up to Payne Haas. So there's a few areas where I think I could take some money out, but at the moment, Turbo is my gun second fullback alongside KP. Alright guys, that is my preseason team reveal. I'm sure there's going to be at least 1 or 2 more team reveals before the round 1 deadline, given that my mind is constantly changing. But this is probably the first team that I felt very settled on, so hence why I wanted to actually do a full video on it. The video is probably going to be a little bit longer than I anticipated, but hopefully you appreciate getting into the stats a little bit more that you guys know that I like to do. So if you enjoyed the video, do please give it a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing to the channel as well if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the next one.